What if I create a peer-to-peer group of individuals that have achieved a lot of wealth, and one of their values was generosity of spirit? What if the whole purpose was to touch, before I die, 3 billion humans on the planet? It's not just what you have in your bank account that's going to make you wealthy. It's also intellectual, it's social, it's human, it's emotional, and it's spiritual.
All right, welcome back to the Better Human podcast. It's been a while since we've been recording, and we've been on a little bit of a hiatus because we've been looking to launch some new series. And today, we've got a very special guest. His name is Charlie Garcia, founder of a company called R360, which he's going to tell us all about. He's a best-selling author. He's a guru in his own right. He does a lot of work around purpose. And this new series is going to be called The Billionaire Mindset. So what does it take to generate that type of success? Anyway, I'm really excited for us to get into the show. Let's jump straight into it. Charlie, welcome to the show, my man.
Thanks, Greg. Love being here. We met, recently, but we're becoming fast friends, and I'm very excited to join your audience.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think the audience is going to get a lot out of this today because you are just a world of wisdom and experience. And every time I meet with you and I chat with you, I'm always amazed at how much effort and energy you put in, not just to sort of sharing the advice, the wisdom, the experience, but this lifelong learner that you that you are, which is incredible. So for the audience, let's do a little bit of a lay of the land. So tell us about R360. What is R360 and how did it come about?
Great. So if you think of R360, think of a collection of 1,000 superheroes, 100 in the US, 100 abroad, who have been able to create at least 100 million in wealth. So mostly entrepreneurs, but they're going to use their entrepreneurial grit and their wealth to be a force for good in the world and to solve some of the world's most intractable problems for the benefit of humanity, to heal our planet, and to work collaboratively and thus be a role model for other families of wealth. There's only so much money that you really need, and the rest, how you're going to do that, and also ensuring that the seeds that you leave behind, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, take those blessings and live a happy, purposeful life, but continue to focus on how to help others. That's really what R360 is about. How did it start? I grew up overseas in the Republic of Panama. My father and mother met at Georgetown University. He decided to become a heart surgeon. My mother was a nurse. I was born in Georgetown, but at the age of 2, I grew up overseas. I ended up going into the military, mostly to piss off my dad, but that's another story we can get into. It's the one thing I was not allowed to do is be in the military. As you know, living in Costa Rica, joining the military in Latin America is kind of social mobility for the poor, not what well-educated people do. So I went to the Air Force Academy. I wanted to fly combat aircraft. And because I was a dumbass, literally, lights out at midnight and I'm studying under the covers with a flashlight. And that does wonders to your 20/20 vision. So I was not as good in physics and calculus and trigonometry as I should have. So I had to work harder than others. And that involved staying up till 2, 3 in the morning under the covers of the flashlight. I still stay up till 2, 3 in the morning, but I'm not using a flashlight anymore. Anyways, my eyes go to hell. And back then you couldn't do the LASIK surgery. That wasn't allowed. So since I couldn't fly, they wanted me to be a navigator. And the thought of being a navigator, I wasn't happy about that. So I said, you know what? I was into all the James Bond series, and 5 people could become an intelligence officer. So I become an intelligence officer, and I ended up getting stationed mostly in Latin America in the 80s. There was war. So I was working with Navy SEALs and Green Berets and jumping out of airplanes and going to jungle school, doing all that crazy stuff. But at some point, I decided the military wasn't for me. I had a great mentor who was a 4-star general. He told me I should become a White House fellow. So I ended up getting lucky, and I worked in a transition year between Reagan and Bush. So I worked for Reagan for 6 months. I worked for Bush, and I had been hired to work with Bill Bennett when he was Secretary of Education. He left, so I didn't want to stay at the State Department. So John Whitehead was the Deputy Secretary at State. He had been the chairman of Goldman Sachs. We became friends. I decided to go to Columbia Law. I went to Columbia Law, didn't like the law very well, so I started a hedge fund, and I made my wealth in the financial services sector, but I never had an MBA. So I got lucky in that somebody told me about a peer-to-peer organization called the Young Presidents Organization, YPO.
Of course, yes, really sort of still today one of the the leaders in peer-to-peer organizations.
Exactly. And then somebody said, no, no, no. You should join Vistage. Vistage has been around the same amount of time as YPO. And being the glutton for punishment that I am, I said, hell, I'll join them both. So I joined them both at the same time. And that peer to peer experience where you're getting vulnerable with people that aren't on your board, so you can really be honest, and they're sharing based on their experiences, not telling you what to do, but hey, this happened to me. It's kind of similar. And I'll tell you what not to do because this is what I did. And let me tell you how it screwed me. Or I had a good result doing this. So because of that, I was able to sell my company to a public company. And then I had this wealth and I knew stocks, bonds, options. I didn't know all the different, like 20 different asset classes. So then I joined another peer to peer group, which helped you become a better investor. And then in 2015, I had an opportunity to become the CEO of a nonprofit that was focused in the Latino market, which was going bankrupt. And it was one of my passions is helping the Latino market. So I ended up taking over this nonprofit. And then I found out that there was a peer-to-peer group for social entrepreneurs that was created by these YPOers. And they asked me to take it over and run it. I had decided to go to Harvard for a year for an advanced leadership course for people that had already retired like myself and figure out what do you want to do for the next 20 years of your life. And I had already been influenced by Bill George. Through a class that I took with him, we became friends. I hired a coach. I discovered my life purpose. So Bill nominated me for this very, very difficult program to get into. I ended up being one of the 44 people selected, but you could also bring your spouse. And you could take any class at Harvard or at MIT, and you had to do the homework, but you didn't have to take exams, write papers. They called on you a lot. So you were just there to learn. So I went with my wife. I did that. And at the time, I was still running this peer-to-peer group. I had grown it to 34 countries, 1,000 social entrepreneurs. It was called Tendril. I developed the new methodologies, but the one thing I could never figure out is how to help them raise money because they were really good at their thing but they weren't good at partnering with other social entrepreneurs. And now all of a sudden you have 6 to 8 social entrepreneurs meeting monthly, talking to each other, and they started helping each other on like funding sources and things like that. But they themselves were not really good at raising money. So I thought to myself, what if I reverse engineer this? What if, what if I create a peer-to-peer group of individuals that have achieved a lot of wealth, and one of their values was generosity of spirit? And then what if the whole purpose was to touch, before I die, 3 billion humans on the planet in a positive light that we could measure, and we basically connect and grow this 1,000 superheroes to this other organization of now over 1,000 social entrepreneurs all over the world. One of them who founded it is from South Africa, where you were from originally, and he was named like Man of the Year South Africa for what he has done in education. And these guys, if all of a sudden they had 10 or 20 million dollars, they could increase their impact 20, 30, 40, 50x. So what I did is we had the summer off. I got into this 1-year program. On the summer, everybody left. I applied to Harvard has a venture incubation program. They select 20 teams out of about 130 that applied. I applied, I got selected. I was one of the 20 teams. And the idea is, how do we do this? I had 2 Harvard and 2 MIT professors, 10 students. Of course, my wife was like, yeah, everyone else is on vacation, but you figure out a way to work all summer. I said, but it's an award. It's a gift. I got this. I, I'm going to the Harvard iLab every day over the summer. We interviewed over 100 people, and this whole idea for R360 came out that we were going to be very purpose driven. So um, our our purpose really revolves around architecting an oasis for strategic wealth creators and their families to flourish by mastering the 6 forms of capital. Because my partner, Michael Cole, who wrote a book, More Than Money, we believe that wealth is more than money. It's not just what you have in your bank account that's going to make you wealthy. It's not only financial capital, it's intellectual, it's social, it's human, it's emotional, and it's spiritual. And that spells fishes. So, Jesus, the rebellious Jew, was a fisherman of men. And right now we're about to pick a new pope. The black smoke went up yesterday, so they're still working on it. And each new pope designs their own ring, and it always has fishes on it. So I think of that kind of, we are looking for men and women that have created great wealth or have inherited, because we have now members in 2nd and 3rd generation. We also have women that may have been school teachers and get divorced from their billionaire hedge fund husbands or vice versa. And now they join R360, like, oh my God, what do I do? How do I not screw up my kids? And they want to be in a peer group. And you came for the kind of emotional, we only listen to 20% that we retain, and we don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to get to our objectives. And every meeting that we have, we are strengthening one of these 6 pillars. And at the end of the meeting, everybody reads to each other based on what I learned from Greg and you guys. I want to be held accountable over the next year before we meet with these 5 or 6 things. And as the patriarch or matriarch for your family, it's not only for yourself, but for your spouse, your kids, your grandkids. How am I going to lose this great stuff that I'm learning, not only for myself, but for my family, to become better listeners, how to communicate better, how to get what they want, how to get out of these different emotional states that we naturally get in. Um, so that's basically, and then our members want to have fun. So we have circles, we have like 20 different circles, adventure. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, we did a health, wellness, and longevity summit in Arizona. We had a group that went to the Buffett, the Woodstock of capitalism. At the same time, we had a group of about 16, 18 members at the Kentucky Derby. I'm getting ready to go to India, supposed to go see the Dalai Lama, but he had a little bit of a challenge health-wise. So we've redone the whole thing to be a spiritual retreat in the Himalayas and the #1 spa and spiritual retreat in the world. And as long as Pakistan and India don't blow themselves up,
Yeah,
and
well,
my
that's been going on for like, for forever, it's like Israel and the Middle East. That's just a
right,
ongoing conflict.
right. But when I'm going with my daughter, and my wife is
Yeah,
is
different story, different story.
so anyway, hopefully that trip will happen. I have a daughter. I have 3 daughters. One of them's graduating from NYU on the 15th, so I'll be there for that, and then taking my other daughter on a daughter, you know, father trip to a spiritual retreat. She went to a school founded by Buddhists in Boulder called Naropa, so she's super excited. And the Dalai Lama's best friend, who's a Canadian the physicist, has known him for 72 years. I mean, since 1972, has written 4 best-selling books with him, is going to join us, kind of walk us through. So that's
Very cool.
more than you wanted to hear, but that's how
No,
R360 came
that's
about.
amazing. I got to tell you, you guys do some very cool experiences. I had the privilege of sitting in the sessions with you guys and just sort of going through some of the upcoming events, and I'm like, how incredible is it that, like, what you guys are trying to do is, for example, go meet the Dalai Lama, have a conversation, and really work on that spirituality. But I want to come back to something because I want to make this a little more tangible for the audience. So I've done a lot of work in Washington and with, the different US agencies. And it is always a difficult transition to go from that sort of public sector to the private sector. And it seems that you did that very well, right? Which was, you're in the military and you landed in Washington. And, I think maybe it helped that you said you had an amazing
I,
mentor,
I,
that
I
4-star
left out the
general.
5 businesses that I raised money and failed. So I've had a lot of, like Tyson says, I've gotten hit in the face by reality
A
also.
few times. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what people don't get to see in today's sort of world of social media. You just see the success, right? Which is like, hey, I'm successful, or I've run this business, or we sold the business. But, it's that iceberg analogy, which is what most people get to see is just the peak of the iceberg. But what they don't get to see is what sits below that, the trials, the tribulations, the failures, the bumps, the obstacles. So, just on a general question, what do you think allowed you to keep going? 5 businesses that failed, the bumps, the getting punched in the face, as Mike Tyson says. What was what was your thing that kept you going? Was it just like, for me, it's like I'm just a gritty, aggressive, fighting type of personality, which is I just want to keep fighting. Some people are maybe opposite to that, which is it's more of a whatever type of approach. Let's just keep going and try something new. What do you think did it for you that allowed you to stay the course?
Interestingly, I was on the national board of Junior Achievement, which has been around for 100 years, and it goes into all, K-12, teaching kids how to become entrepreneurs. I was also in the military, and a lot of research on this, that 10% of the population have like a service gene that they want to be in the military. Another 10% have this entrepreneurial gene, and they can survive the very rough emotional ups and downs that happen, uh, that you got to be aware of. But I think with a lot of reflection, going back, what I have seen even in R360, that people created great wealth because of emotional wounds, intentional or unintentional, from their parents. So I had 2 wonderful parents, but they never said, I love you. They were both like academic valedictorians. They were brilliant. And I think early on, I got this thing that my parents aren't going to love me unless I can achieve things. And I needed external validation to feel loved. So I would do all these things. I was very rebellious. And I learned early on that um, not not to get caught, because if I did get caught, there would be severe repercussions. But and I did, I was an altar boy, and I decided I was going to take the scraps of making hosts at a Catholic church that was by my house, that I was an altar boy, to make money so I could go to the racetrack and bet. But that's another story. But then when I was filling up these little baggies and selling them at school for 5 cents and got caught, and got expelled for 3 days, I got my ass whipped, because in those days, my father was belt, my mother was brush. and I had a complement of both. But again, it was achieving. Like I had to always achieve, and I got into the military academy, the Air Force Academy, and then I become the chairman of the honor committee at the Air Force Academy, and I become a top graduate. And everything that I do, if you look at my resume, is like all these achievements. And I found out much later on in life, and now I've even taken the trouble of writing a eulogy, is that people only remember, how did I make you feel? And what impact did I have in your life? They don't care that I worked for 6 presidents or blah, blah, blah. And in fact, my eulogy, which is 10 pages, 80% of it is family, because I said I'm going to die when I'm 101. So this is how I engage with my kids and my grandkids. R360 is basically one sentence. Charlie founded R360, a community of individuals that have touched over 3 billion people on the planet in a very positive way. That's it. But it's it's only about the impact that we had, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because traditional generations, and we could say sort of maybe from the boomers on, was what was very common with them was what they would define by their profession, defined by their role. And you would make a joke, which is like, how do you know the difference between a boomer, a Gen X, and a Gen Y, right? And boomers would say, hi, I'm Greg, I'm the CEO of Witz Education. Gen X would be like, hey, I'm Greg. And then, a millennial might say, like, I'm not sure if I am Greg, but like, let's have conversation. So it's interesting to your point, which is the importance of, defining that purpose. And you do a lot of work with people around figuring out what their purpose is. So talk to
Yeah.
us a little bit about that. How did
Yeah.
you
And I'd say,
begin
look,
that journey?
I have a lot of drive, and that is developed. I also don't have a fear of failure. I was an athlete. I was always kind of the coach. I'm deeply spiritual. I believe that there's a higher power that is guiding me in everything that I do. I feel that I'm a vessel. So all those things really obviously are other if you look at the value, I'm curious. I'm like super curious. I'm like a little Da Vinci. I'm a little bit of a polymath, and I go down a lot of rabbit holes because I'm super curious. So I don't want to leave that behind. So to focus, laser in on what you're saying, give me some guidance on how I can be the most helpful to your listeners.
Before we go there, I actually want to take a step back. So how much you've heard the saying that, like, if you want to go fast, you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you go with a group, right? And your network is your net worth. And it sounds like you've really lived that, right? I mean, this is what a lot of your effort is. Do you think you would have achieved what you've achieved today without the group and the people and the team along the way? And who did make some of those, and who were some of the biggest impactors for you?
Yes and no. So it's kind of interesting. LinkedIn today has 3 billion people on the planet that use it. I am one of the top 100, used to be top 20 most connected people in the world on LinkedIn. So I have massive networks. It's part of my gift, but I use it because part of my life purpose, which is to inspire and connect others to achieve extraordinary things, is helping others, right? And I have a very difficult time asking for help. So I've never monetized my network. What I do believe in, and I got this from various people, was mentors. I've had like 10 incredible mentors. My first book, A Message from Garcia, Yes, You Can Succeed. It's in 15 languages, and I honor all of my mentors. I mean, I had a 4-star general who graduated from West Point, was an English major, didn't look like a general, but he spoke 5 languages. He goes on to become the NATO Supreme Allied Commander, and he's like a second father to me. No, probably because he had 3 daughters. He was trying to probably get one of those married. Didn't quite work out, but I got to be honest about that. But he did take a unique interest in me. I had my father-in-law, my first marriage, was either going to go to jail because he was in a motorcycle gang or become an incredible entrepreneur. By the time I met him, he owned 3 public companies and had a very difficult personality. He had 2 sons that were in the business with them and couldn't deal with them and left. My father had just died, who was a very tough guy. I figured there's no way anybody could be anywhere close to my dad. So I went to work for him for 3 years and I learned a ton. And yes, he'd scream at me. I wouldn't scream back. The next day he'd apologize. His 3 kids would scream back. He'd blow up and things would get bad. I guess I figured out the code. But in those 3 years, I learned from the most incredible entrepreneur. He had started from nothing, and he owned companies and banks and all over mainly in the U.S. and Europe. And I was at his side for 3 years before starting my own company. And I had 4 or 5 failures as well. That, but I had leadership skills from the Air Force Academy, and I was a good leader, and that helped me out. But I think the mentors, and I probably had like 10 amazing mentors that even when I started my business, the reason that I sold it, there was a guy named Max Chapman who was a military man, a Marine, had like 10% body fat. He had been the CEO of Kidder Peabody and one of the most successful investment banks in the US. He sold it, I think, to General Electric. He then became the US president of Nomura, first American on the board of a Japanese bank. He was the vice chairman of the Amex. And I had a little company. Why would this guy be on my board? Well, I was able to approach him in such a way that he ended up mentoring me. When I started a hedge fund, I found a guy that had won the stock trading competition 7 years in a row. He had a very rough personality, but we both went to Columbia. He went to Columbia Business School. I went to Columbia Law School. I moved to Boca because of him, but I had to literally sit in his office for 21 days, 22 days before he finally got tired of it and took me out to lunch. And then we started a hedge fund called Leatherneck Partners. So I learned early on, Greg, it's like if I want X, I got to find somebody that's done X and get them as a coach or get them as a mentor. I decided through R360, I've written 3 books, but I've never written a novel. But I don't really want the novel. I want a major motion picture film that goes global, because through my character, my big, hairy, audacious goal is to bring peace and reconciliation among the Abrahamic religions that fight as much within the religion than without, and it represents half the planet. So first, I've never written a novel. I don't know how to write dialogue, and how the heck and one of 2 million novels get picked up into movies. So I find a guy who teaches at Columbia, creative writing. He's written a book that became a movie with Spielberg and another one with Ford Francis Coppola. So I figure, okay, this guy has something, and he's 78 years old, to teach me. And I hired him for a year and I paid him, and he really helped me with the base. It took me another 2.5 years after that 1 year to finally have my writing at a level that's decent enough that I'm willing to take the first in the series out, which I'm hopefully will get finished this summer. But again, I think for me, it was really more, since I'm not leveraging my network, and, we can get into that. It was really mentors to me. My grandfather taught me a long time ago, when you learn to shave, try to learn on someone else's face first. And and that really stuck with me, because my father-in-law said, any decision that you're going to do in business, I've done it 20 times. And the first 19 I failed. So you're an idiot if you don't call me first.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the difference between a good mentor and a great mentor?
Look, for people that are just trying to suck up information, when people get older, they get a lot of energy from helping other people. And you need to find somebody that has the time to meet with you regularly. You can share whatever you want with them. They'll give you great advice, but more than advice, the great ones will introduce you to resources. They'll say, hey, you obviously need a new CFO. You can't afford to hire Russell Reynolds, but I gave these guys so much damn business. They're the best. Let me make a call to this guy I know and see if he'll kind of, help you out and do it at a price that's reasonable to you. That is the type of mentor that really goes kind of beyond the call of duty to not only mentor you, but actually help you succeed.
Well articulated and said. I agree with that entirely. I want to come back to this whole concept of asking for help. I see it a lot in the work that I do. I actually have the same problem, truthfully. Like I want to serve and help. I have a very difficult time asking for help, and I'm still trying to figure out why. Maybe it's just because for me, it's like there's this like I want to do it on my own, or I believe I'm strong enough to fight, or maybe it's some weird thing, which is like I don't deserve the help.
I am with you on that because that's what I'm exploring right now. If somebody said to me, and I'm a student of religion, I have 4,000 books on religions. If somebody said, what is your religion? 6 words: love God, love myself, love others. End of story. And the question is, if I have one of the largest networks of people in the world, do I really love myself if I'm not willing to ask for help? If I have a divine mission on earth to help others, what is it about me that holds me back from asking others to help? Is it because I'm not deserving? I don't love myself. So I think there's something there. I haven't really explored it deep enough, but maybe you and I can scratch that one at some other time.
I think so. I think it might be worth it, And the other thing that I heard you talk a lot about is like, a lot of these guys and girls and people that really manifest or build this type of success, financial success and spiritual success, they've come from some sort of traumatic background, right? There's been some tough upbringing, tough experiences along the way. Do you see that as a common theme throughout all, like if we look at the R360 members, like, that sort of billionaire sort of level, is there a common theme with that or it is
There
quite
is.
sporadic?
There is, but again, I would say it's probably 20%. It's not 80%. But look, 14 of our members did not go to college. 9 did not graduate from high school. 5 of the 9 are billionaires. I think that what happens is they get scarred by poverty. They get scarred by alcoholic parent that beats them or all kinds of stuff. And something goes off in their brain, like, no freaking way, this is not going to be me. Um, but I would say that 80% have certain qualities. Okay. They're lifelong learners. They're disciplined. They know how to set goals. One of the most important things is that they can manifest. And there's some I've done that my whole life. I became a White House fellow because I ordered one of their brochures. And for 2.5 years, I carried it everywhere with me. But at night before going to bed, the last thing I did was I looked through all of the people that got selected. I visualized myself. There's a brain surgeon from Stanford, James Dottie, who just came out with a new book. His first book was amazing, Into the Magic Shop, but his second goes into how you can subconsciously put your brain in a kind of a dream state where you have to bring in the five senses and you have to visualize yourself in the future. What does it smell like? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? And if you can do that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, you know, there's a billion things that you're processing every second. And there you could be at a dinner party and somebody is saying something over there that goes into your mind and says, you got to stop talking. You got to go over there and meet that guy over there. You don't kind of know what you're doing, but your brain is taking you in that direction. In my first book, A Message from Garcia, I met a guy. He was an eye surgeon, and we're having lunch, and he's this like worth 150 million or more, and he wasn't a good student. He wanted to be a doctor, and people laughed at him. But somebody gave him a book that was written in the 20s, and and the book is called It Works. And he had like thousands of these in his closet that he would give away. And I integrated that into chapter 3 of that book. And basically, and I created an app to do it, similar to what you and I were talking to with AI before. And it basically says, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you want to do with your life? Okay. So you write like 30 things down. Then it says, okay, you got to crystallize these into the top 10. And then if you had to put them in order, like if I wasn't going to do one of the 10, what would it be? And you finally get to number 1, but now you have the order. And the only thing you have to do, Greg, he wrote those down. This is in the 60s. And every day he would take it out of his pocket 2 or 3 times and read those things. And his parents told him that he was never going to be anybody. So he wanted to be famous. In those days, it wasn't a Learjet. He wanted to own and pilot a helicopter, which was like so cool in the 60s. Um, he goes on to medical school in Europe. He invents the procedure to take cataracts out of people's eyes. While everybody was going to parties and whatever, he was focused on, he was a saxophone player as well. And guess who invites him onto his show? Johnny Carson. Not only to play the saxophone, but to tell everybody. And I asked him permission because he had cancer. He was actually dying, whether I could. He had a book, and his book was called Through My Eyes, and it never talked about his little strategy with that book. And I said, why isn't that in the book? And he's like, well, my colleagues already think I'm kind of nutty. If I would have put that in there, this manifesting, which he did, they would think I'm nuts. So I asked permission to put it in my book, and he said yes. So that's a commonality that 80% of our 360 members have, is they're very focused. They know where they're going. They have a plan. They have rituals, you know?
All the stuff that you sort of hear in general in the world today, you know, manifestation, focusing on goals, vision exercises, journaling, being a lifelong learner. And, you know, I think the challenge, and I said this to you earlier, I think the challenge with a lot of people today is they go through the exercise of the learning or the reading, but they don't go through the effort of the practice. And that's what I hear you talk a lot about, which is, if I was to sort of paraphrase, like, it's one thing reading a book, it's another thing sort of really working and practicing and trying to become masterful and, you know, putting in the exercise and the effort to
Well,
strengthen those
look,
muscles.
I learned from you. It takes 66 days to start a habit. And if you and I go to Amazon right now and we put in diet books, there's 100,000 books on how to lose weight. But it is so simple. Eat less, exercise. But there's 100,000 books and diets. And like you said, it's the execution and developing the rhythm, the habits. And you know you're not going to be 100%. So you have to kind of build in that, hey, even though I'm off a few days of 7, I'm still going to get back into my routine on Monday. So nobody is 100% consistent. We're not machines, but but you have to have that kind of 80%. You have to be on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's that old sort of 80-20 rule, right? Which is, it's the 20% that drive 80% of the success. And that's probably because they're putting in 80% of the effort.
Well, there's that, and there's the magic that Warren Buffett said. It's like the eighth wonder of the world is compounding, right? You take a penny and you double it like so many times, and you'd be crazy that you're going to have millions by X the 20th time or something. But it's the same thing with human development. If you are increasing your speed by a quarter of a second a day, and you're improving your skill sets. So I'll give you an example. One of my superpowers, when I went to the Air Force Academy, 1979, guys, we didn't type, we went to shop, typing was like home ec, right? So before starting school, we had 3 weeks where the morning was typing, and the afternoon for 3 weeks was 4 hours of speed reading. Okay. And they would teach you like this line, one line would be up there and it would be on for 10 seconds. But then the next day it was 9 seconds and then 8 seconds. And then they taught you, don't read left to right, read down the middle, and don't vocalize that. You got to take the line into your mind, read straight down. And at the end of each day, you had to take a comprehension test. So you had to read and you had to learn. So, and what motivated me more than anything at that time was, hey, if you can master this stuff while it's Friday night and your classmates are studying, you're going to be the first one in the bar with the nice looking women. They're going to get there when you've already taken off. So I put a lot of time into this, and I'm 18. So imagine from the age of 18 till today, the neuroplasticity on my mind. I can pick up a book on an airplane from Miami to New York. I'm done with the book. I can read that fast because I've been doing it since I was 18. Now something comes out called artificial intelligence. And imagine when you can read at the speed of light, and you can and everybody can be a programmer now. All you got to do is ask good questions. And some days I'll spend 6 hours just prompt engineering, asking the right questions. So I have about 2,500 hours of my reading speed into artificial intelligence. So now my kids should be teaching me, and now I'm teaching them.
Yeah, we had that conversation and telling me how your kids are coming up being like, "Hey dad, like how do I use this whole world of AI and what are the prompts and stuff?" And it's funny that not funny, but it's amazing that you have more insight. But there's again that whole lifelong learning, which is you for the last 3 years have spent 2,500 plus hours learning AI.
Yeah. And you know what I've given up? I was reading 4 or 5 books a week. I'm not doing that anymore. Partly when I moved to Colorado and I got to Boulder, my wife said, we're going to go to Barnes and Noble and you're going to buy thrillers, because the only time you read nonfiction or fiction is where I'm on vacation, and you're never on vacation. So you're never relaxing. So now we're going to have no TV in the bedroom, and you're going to have a stack of books, and they're all going to be fiction. You're going to go to sleep in that world. So the combination of AI and then writing a novel, my reading of other books is kind of non-existent now because of that.
Yeah. Well, how many books do you think you've read in your lifetime?
Look, I have a library of over 10,000 books, and any book of mine that you pick up, I learned this from General Galvin when I was on a plane going with him somewhere. He's like, why don't you have a pen in your hand? It's like, what do you mean, sir? He says, you retain like 3 times more if you're writing. So in a book, I'll write, I'll take notes. And then if it makes an impact, I go to the blank pages on the back, and I'll say page 6, page 9. So you can go to any one of my books and you can see what I actually got out of it. The problem now with that is that my wife had it up to here with Amazon boxes arriving. One of the biggest fights that we got into, and she was going to throw out some of my books. So now I have probably 2,000 books on Kindle, which I'm going to have to leave in my will because there's so many books. And I've learned there it's hard to you can take notes, but it's kind of a pain.
So it's different. It's totally different, right?
Yeah, I mostly
Yeah.
highlight.
So let's talk about purpose quickly. You do a lot of work around helping people discover their purpose. If we were to give people some starting points on like this is where you would begin on that journey, what would you recommend?
I would recommend one of the teachers that taught with Bill George when I took the course, Authentic Leadership at Harvard, was Nick Craig. And Nick wrote a book called Leading from Purpose. And instead of paying $16,000 to go 5 days to Harvard, you can buy his book for 25 bucks or whatever. It's on Kindle as well. I believe he may even have a workbook. And you really have to look at what are your God-given gifts that you do better than 99% of humans on the planet. And how are you going to use those gifts for the benefit of others? And in Matthew, there's a great story, a parable, the story of the talents, where a master goes, and it's the only time Jesus in the Bible gets like really pissed off. Like, if you don't do this, you're going to go to the darkness of hell. And he gave 5 talents to one servant, 2 to another, 1 to another. And he came back after his long journey, and one of them had like quadrupled it. The one with 2 had doubled it. And the third one took the talent, and that was the name of the coin, coincidentally, and he buried it because he was afraid. And he then, God, Jesus basically banishes him to hell. The reason is every person, there's 8 billion people, you have something special that makes you special. And the idea is to discover it, have the courage to follow your calling, and take that gift for the benefit of others. Now, sometimes that gift could be being a doctor and or being an entrepreneur that creates wealth. It could be being a teacher. It could be being in a war zone doing, human rights work or whatever that is very, very difficult, challenging, dangerous. But if that's your purpose, you're here to discover it and follow it. So that is the core of the work. And you have to figure out your fears. You got to do all these things and put it into 7 or 8 or 9 words that you're going to remember. And you can tell people, my life purpose is to inspire and connect others to achieve extraordinary things. And I can back it up by telling you I'm one of the top 100 most connected people on LinkedIn. I like to inspire. I've taught at MIT. I'm talking, I'm writing. And then in any organization I've been, I'm the one that figures out the big, hairy, audacious goal, the strategy. When I was on a public board on the New York Stock Exchange at the age of 44, when the average was 61, I was like, strategy. When Jeb Bush appoints me to the Board of Education, one of 7 people, my first question was, what's our strategy? We got 54% of the straight budget. And guess what? No freaking strategy. So my role there was, no, we need to hire someone. We need to have a strategy, objectives, tactics, milestones, measurements, blah, blah, blah. So that's who I am.
I want to ask you about the no asshole rule, right, that you guys have. Tell us a little bit about that because it's
Well,
um, I find it impactful.
yeah, well, we have values, and I am not on the membership committee, and I did that on purpose. I have a conflict. And um, we set up a membership committee of about 7 people. And they have turned down 72 families, including 9 billionaires. And one of the billionaires was very very helpful in ideas and starting the company, but he's a little rough around the edges. He's the type of guy that if I call, he'll drop everything to help you, but he's rough around the edges. And the membership committee said, hey, you just said it. We don't want people that are rough around the edges. That doesn't work for us. They need to have kind of the total package. And we do, the package is very confidential, but it's up to like 40 pages. We do deep due diligence of people that know them, references, people they don't give us as references that we know that are on boards with them, that are employees, that are former employees. So we collect all that information, and we now have gotten a lot better weeding out those type of people. We went to an event, a leadership retreat with Richard Branson right at the end of the pandemic. He had just come back from space. And one of the individuals' wives said, when you go to one of these events for 5 days on a island, there's always one or two people that don't fit. But with R360, like everybody fit. Everybody had that confident humility. Nobody's trying to prove anything. Um, Nobody's joining because they're trying to solicit. Everybody's there because they want to be a better human, a better parent, many entrepreneurs have not so good relationships with children because they were so busy doing their thing, and they need to repair all that, and they're learning. Um, the way that we become immortal in life is we leave these seeds behind, which are our children and then our grandchildren. And if we can inculcate them with our values and the things that will make them happy and purposeful, then when we die, our legacy continues. And that's really what R360 is about.
Best business advice or entrepreneurial advice you'd give to someone up and coming?
Look, the best book that I would recommend, and I would tell you to read it 20 times, is not Think and Grow Rich. It's Laws of Success. So, Laws of Success is written by the same guy. It was 1,200 pages. And it was written by Napoleon Hill. And W. Clement Stone, who was a very smart insurance guy, said, dude, no one's going to buy a frickin' 1,200 page book. It's like a weapon of mass destruction, for crying out loud. Now, if you can get this down to 250 words and don't call it a boring law of success, call it Think and Grow Rich, well, that's the best business selling book of all time. It still sells like 10,000 copies a week. But the 1,200 word version is much better. So I would tell individuals, and one of my goals before I die at 101 is to come out with a new version, because you're going to learn about Rockefeller and Vanderbilt and Carnegie and Wolf, all these Edison, great individuals. But I'd love to do it from these individuals that I know, many of them that didn't even graduate from high school and are billionaires. And how the hell do they do it? And write an updated version. But Laws of Success, they can order it on Amazon, read it. I can't imagine listening to a 1,200 page book, but I'm sure you could do that too.
Yeah. Listen, if it's going to contribute to your growth and success.
So that's the first thing. But the second one, the biggest mistake is not to have a disciplined operating system to grow and scale your business. I use the entrepreneurial operating system, Gino Wickman, Traction. One of our members, Mark Moses, wrote a great book, Think Big and Make Big Happen. And he has his own methodology. There's others, but if you don't have a disciplined methodology to hire people, to set your strategy, your budgets, to run your company, you're dead. You really need an operating system that's well thought out. And the last piece of advice is, Jim Collins has done amazing research. Read all his books, but he has one small monograph. It's about 30 pages. And it's called Turning the Flywheel. If your business does not have a well thought out flywheel, and I will tell you that Amazon, that was really in bad shape in 2001, met Jim, adopted this flywheel, and Amazon is what it is today. They'll tell you, because they figured out if we do this one thing first on a 9 to 10 level, 10 being perfect, we can't but help to do this. And if we do that, we can't help to do this, that. And then when the wheel turns, it's going to pick up speed in doing that number one again. And by doing that 1 through 6 steps over and over and over, the monograph has like 10 examples of from other businesses that are well known. But I would say to think about that. And even if you've been in business for a long time, like Amazon was, adopting it and getting buy-in and focusing on that and knowing the Law of Success book is going to get you, and getting great mentors can't but help you become successful. And then talk to Greg, because Greg will teach you how to communicate and how to avoid stepping into conflict. And I think you got to know how to write. You got to know how to think. You have to learn how to communicate to achieve your objective. And our ego just gets in our way all the time.
I appreciate that coming from you, man. All right, I got 2 more questions. So the first question is, what do you think the difference is between $100 million person versus a billionaire?
You know, some of it is luck, right? We have some young individuals that are going to become billionaires before they're 40, but I find that they have this common story. Like this one individual had a situation where their grandfather died at the age of 13 because they were misdiagnosed. And if they would have diagnosed it correctly, he would have lived. So this thing went off like, I'm going to become a doctor so this doesn't happen to other people. I lost my best friend, da da da. And then becomes a doctor, but is very entrepreneurial. The next thing, he's in this geriatric kind of space in nursing homes, and he grows. The next thing you know, um, he has a very large exit for the majority of his company. And with this new private equity partner, within 3 or 4 years, they'll end up exiting the whole thing. And then they'll be 40, 41, and we'll be at that $1 billion level. And then imagine if we can say, look, we can teach you how to invest that where it's growing and doubling about every 7 or 8 years. So by the time you're 60, it's going to have doubled 3 more times, right? Even if it was like 200 million, it'd go to 400, it'd go to 800, go to $1.6 billion. But if you're already at $1 billion, where you go to 2 to 4 to 8, and that's just like having good people manage the wealth. So what I want to do is say, instead of having a $1 billion thing, what if you could take your gifts and impact 100 million people? I talked yesterday to my buddy Scott Harrison, called me, and Scott was making money as a alcohol promoter in New York. Now he's runs charity water, and 20 million souls have clean water because he took his gifts, very entrepreneurial, and now he has $100 million plus nonprofit. So I want to take these guys, and a lot of our members have become venture philanthropists. They'll find a nonprofit that's like a million, 2 million a year. And I'll say, hey, I'm going to come in and give you a $5 million gift. I'm going to come on your board, and we're going to go on this journey together. And then what happens is 3 years later, it's a $20 million nonprofit. It's increased the impact 10 times. The individual was on the board mentoring very entrepreneurially this nonprofit and the leader. And now they go off and say, okay, let me find another one to do. So, or like myself, I go on to the State Board of Education, and I would say my greatest achievement, I did it because a third of Latinos weren't graduating from high school. I figured out it had to do with reading. I led the governor's reading task force. And now Florida has the highest graduation rates in the United States for Latinos. the highest going to college. And if you look at fourth grade as a key grade in measuring reading skills, African American fourth graders in Florida read better than whites in 33 states. Now, that happened because an entrepreneur who was very busy in his company took a role that pays zero. I had 2 days of the month every year. I had to be in Tallahassee on the Board of Education dealing with bureaucracy and politics, but that didn't involve money, it involved my time. So with R360, we're saying you have intelligence, you're an entrepreneur, you can go into like a state board of education, influence. I have 3 daughters. So what do? I become one of 2 men on the national board of the Girl Scouts, 30 board members, 2 men, 28 women. It's the 4th largest cookie company in the United States, and it was having all kinds of issues with retention and da, 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 da. And I served 3 years on that because they're the number one leadership training for girls in the United States, over 2 million girls a year. So if I could bring my wisdom, I mean, yeah, I contributed money as well, but it's $1 billion nonprofit. It was really more, it's a nonprofit that's also a business. They sell more cookies in like 4 months than most cookie companies. So it's a combination of those things, Greg, and figuring out where you can make an impact with your time, your family, your resources.
At the end of the episode, we come to the most important question, and I think you've already answered it in several different ways, and plus what you just said right now. But we have to ask it anyway, which is, what do you think we could all do to be better humans tomorrow?
I could answer that a lot of different ways, but I'll answer it this way. Something happened to me when I was at the Air Force Academy that was a little shameful, and it had this impact on me. There was a janitor, okay? And we were called doolies, which is Greek for like slaves. So your first year, but particularly your first summer at the Air Force Academy, you're treated like a slave. And there was this poor janitor in our squadron. His name was William Crawford. And he'd go away and his bucket of water was spilled. I would, hide his mop and, you know, we would take it out on the poor janitor. So one of my classmates is doing research on Medal of Honor winners for a paper that we had to write for the military. And there was a guy named William Crawford in Italy, in Aviano, Italy, during World War II. There was 100 men in this company or platoon, and a division of German panzers were coming, but they were pinned down because there was 3 German pillboxes. They needed somebody on a suicide mission. And this kid volunteers to take 3 satchel charges, one after the other. He knocks him down, but he gets wounded. So they had to leave him behind. They thought he was dead. When the Germans came, they find him and they patched him up. They walked him all the way back to Berlin, I think. But then the end of the war comes. His parents, by the way, had received the Medal of Honor posthumously because the guy's dead, or they think he's dead. So they have the Medal of Honor. He's from Colorado Springs. So he goes back into the Army. He becomes the highest non-commissioned rank in the Army. And he wanted to stay around young men and women. Comes a janitor. And I go up to him and I said, "Hey, Mr. Crawford, were you ever in the military?" "Yeah." "Air Force?" "No." "Army." "Huh. Were you ever stationed in Italy?" "Yeah." I'm like, "Do you have the Medal of Honor?" He says, "I do, son." I'm like, holy shit. Like, this guy now becomes famous, and he became one of my first real mentors. And what he taught me, Greg, was, believe it or not, how to listen. He taught me, and I forgot to mention this, and I guess I've been doing this since then too, is to visualize people's head MMFI, MMFI. So I'm looking at you and I see on your forehead MMFI. And that means make me feel important. So he taught me these questions that I've taught to my kids. Where are you from? Tell me more. Do you have a family? Tell me more. If you won the lottery and you gave away more than half of it because it was 100 million, with what you had left, what would you do for yourself? And then the other one was, when you were a little kid, what did you want to be when you grow up? And I remember this Senator Martinez, I was raising money for him, and I sat him next to my daughter, who was like, I don't know, 9 years old. And the whole meal, he just talked to her and he said, "Oh my God, your daughter Olivia is such a conversationalist." All she did was ask him these questions. And I think that we all have a divine spark within us. And when you connect authentically with somebody by asking questions and just listening, that divine spark goes up. And when you ask these questions, you really get to what makes them tick and how to help them. So I would do that. And then I would, because I'm such a good connector, I would say, "Hey, Greg, I got to connect you to this one person because I think given all this, they could be really helpful to you." So I have a thing that I treat everybody that I meet as if they were a Medal of Honor winner. Everybody. My wife complains when I get into an Uber that I'm having this massive conversation, but how many I've met Russians that were physicists. I've met admirals that are driving an Uber. So, and always I will treat like the janitor will come in and I will thank them. If I'm there early for one of our meetings, I'll ask about their family. What's their wife's name, their kids' names? And it's because of the shame that I went through from all the bad things I did. And when I took over this nonprofit, I have a picture of William Crawford with his Medal of Honor on, sitting behind me. And I took over this nonprofit that was bankrupt. And I go to their New York office that oversaw Wall Street. And the CEO had this massive office. I turned that office into a place for the presidents of the organization that were managing all the cities to use. I found the smallest cubicle next to a gentleman who came in a wheelchair. I put the image right there on the wall of William Crawford, and people like, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "We're here to serve." I'm not going to be in some big office. I have the smallest office, and kind of leading by example. And I learned that from William Crawford. So that is what I would say is treat everybody you meet like if they were a war hero. And when you see somebody, think MMFI, make me feel important. And the other thing he said to me, his mother, William, always told me, God gave you one mouth and two ears for a reason. So that's my advice.
That's awesome. All right, man. You are a gentleman and a scholar. I truly appreciate your time. It was a gift to hear your stories and your experience and advice as well. For the audience, if you like today's episode, don't forget to like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. Stay happy, stay healthy, and we'll see all of you on the next episode.